let it record. Okay.
Oh, you,
All right.
well, there you go. Good. I'm glad you got those permissions. All right, cool. So, um, security is actually a really big thing, right? You hit that security button on Zoom.
Yep.
I'm just curious, just totally out of left field. I know this, we just kind of were talking about what we talk about, but how about cybersecurity and how has that met you on the school board? Have you talked about that? Has that been a topic that you guys have had to deliberate on and make decisions on?
There's been a little bit of talk of that topic, especially when school went all virtual last March. Because you may know that in the history of the school board, there's been a little bit of debate about whether or not meetings should be live streamed, right? And a lot of people were very indignant that they weren't being live streamed, but this district was being extremely cautious in that when you do live stream, there are a lot of regulations. There's a lot of problem with hacking. There's issues that are involved with that. Now, just so you know, technology is really not my area of expertise, so I'm just kind of going off the way things were explained to me. But there's also ADA compliance issues that were at play with live streaming because if you're a member of the public and that's the only way you can participate and you're hearing impaired and there's no subtitles, then there were laws regarding that. But everything got upended, obviously, when the world basically turned to virtual communication solely for however many months it was. And so now we do have things live streamed, and I'm not even positive how we're getting around all that information, around all those regulations that I thought we were bound by before. I personally don't know all the ins and outs of that, but I do know that we have had to really get involved more with security, and there's firewalls up, and there's different, like last night, even in our meeting, Mr. San Francisco was talking about the different hotspots and how they're filtered. So there is a lot of work going on with that. It's not really my, like I said, area of expertise. So I'm relying on some of my other board members to be sort of overseeing that a little, who maybe are a little more qualified to do that.
That's a good, yeah. Thanks, Kathy. I just rolling into the conversation. I work in the technology world, and security is huge, right? And I do some things by habit, and you're going to do some things by habit based off what you experience. So I was just curious, and that's definitely some good insight into how things work and to how we got the board meetings live on Zoom because they weren't available before. So it's kind of funny how necessity can breed innovation, right? Somebody
Yeah.
figure out a way to get it done. It was there. Somebody even innovated it into existence. It was just needed the right motivation. So thanks for hopping on today, Danielle. Thanks for joining as well. I know you're out there. She
Hi.
See, I go to throw the ball to her. She's not there. So Kathy, we spun this up as just like as part of the as part of the work we've been doing with other parents in districts. And it's a great opportunity to speak to you who is on the board. We've spoken to, was it Danielle, 3 or 4 candidates now of different
4.
districts.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think we're going to keep rolling, right? This is, I've said it's not a summer project. I think this is, an emerging community. The roots are just getting planted, and the conversations are going to continue. So, thanks for, as a sitting board member, I think you offer some really unique perspectives. So, thanks for joining. Maybe you want to introduce yourself, Kathy, and kind of tee things up for what we'll talk
Yeah.
about today. Yeah,
Yeah.
cool.
Thank you so much for having me, first of all.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I'll just tell you a little bit about myself, and then maybe we could just roll right into why I decided to be on the school board, and we can go from there. But yeah, so my name is Kathy DiMarino, and I was elected to the school board in November of 2019, I guess it was now. And I have 3 children. One of them graduated in 2018, and one just graduated this June 2021. And then I've got one more, and she will graduate in 24. So she's going into 10th grade. When I first became interested in the school board, I had kids in elementary, middle school, and high school. I kind of had everything encompassed there. And so I knew a lot about what was going on in the different levels of education, kind of was involved in everything. And I just recently resigned my position as the director of the 7 Ups, which is a show choir that the school runs, and the musical. I directed the high school musical. And the reason I resigned from the positions was just because My daughter, who was a middle schooler at the time, she was coming home from school to an empty house, and I thought, she needs me. This is my time to spend with her, and I'm at the school doing other things. So I had a lot of obviously information about what was going on in the school because I was there doing jobs there and enjoying the students. But I felt like my daughter needed my time. And then when it kind of came up when school board elections were around, I realized that I could still be effective for the school district in a different role because the school board meets in the evenings when my daughter's at gymnastics and doesn't need me. And I knew a lot about education because I'm a former teacher. I taught in the public schools for 10 years before my kids were born. And then when I did have children and was raising them basically full time, I did have some experience teaching in private school. I taught at a Christian school in the area. And I'm a music teacher, so I taught band instruments. And I also teach voice and stuff like that. So anyway, I just have been immersed in education, public education for my whole life. So I really thought that this is a way I can give back to the community and possibly be effective for making sure our schools are as quality as they possibly can be. So that's when I decided to run for the school board. Now, as you probably can imagine, the school board turned into a very different job than I thought it was going to be when I first got involved in the process. I basically was thinking I was going to be just trying to keep our educational programs as quality as possible and being there to oversee. Since I have been a teacher, one of my real interests is just making sure that teachers are accountable and teachers are being observed, and we have the finest teachers in there as we possibly can. And these were my main topics of interest. And then suddenly COVID-19 hit and it just became a political hotbed. Everyone had different ideas. And to be honest, I was a little bit blindsided at how divisive it was going to be politically.
Kathy, let's just stop there for 1 second,
Sure.
right? Because this was a big moment in time for everybody.
Yep.
Tell us how this hit you a little bit more, right? I mean, take us into the experience. How did it hit you?
Well, do you mean COVID-19 and those that
Going from a board member to a different type of board member, right? What was the experience that highlighted that? Is there something that you could give a little more color to kind of how that exactly hit you, right?
Well, I think the first thing that struck me was, well, you know what, let me back up a little bit. Even before March 2020, I found myself as the curriculum chair. And I thought that was a good position for me because I have had experience in education and none of the other board members had. So I had the privilege of looking at textbooks before anyone else really saw them. Board members can all look at textbooks as much as they want, but honestly, a lot of board members have a lot to do, and reading textbooks is a big job. So I was looking through textbooks, and a particular textbook came to me, and it was very politically divisive. And I was shocked that this was an option, and I did talk about it, and that book was replaced by another book. But it became apparent very quickly that we were in a position where textbooks were going to be something that needed to be looked at a lot closer than they probably had ever been, because there were very progressive, radical policies. It was a sociology textbook, so that the book was inflammatory in certain areas, and so that was kind of my first window into, I might be fighting some ideological things here more than I thought. So that kind of got my attention. And then when we started having these policies regarding COVID-19 that were very divisive, I saw all these businesses being closed and people losing their jobs, and other people being very critical of those who were struggling and wanting their business to be opened. I couldn't believe, but this was hitting party lines. And this also was being talked about among school board members. And so we started to become very divided as we were struggling to find the right way to educate kids. So I started to see the political divide start to develop. And of course, I'm sure as you noticed with the whole George Floyd incident and this whole idea of racism in America and how to combat that, that started creating this huge political divide as well, as we looked at how the school district should deal with that situation. So it was pretty early on in my school board tenure that suddenly the partisan issues started to kind of rear their heads.
Yeah, because it's not supposed to be like that in the school board level. You are an elected representative of a constituency that votes for other, the same ballot, with hard politicians. But it's really not supposed to be that. You're supposed to be a guardian. So it sounds like it was a little bit of a slow roll, right? It changed very rapidly, but escalated, right? It became a different animal, but it also became an aggressive animal over a short period of time.
Right. It really started to ramp up after schools started to be closed in March, and then through last summer, we really realized we were fighting a huge battle.
So
and
more parents,
different.
yeah, and you see more parents get involved, I'm sure, right? So
Definitely.
people have been standing up and speaking. So how's that experience been for you?
Well, honestly, that's been the great part of it, is because, the school board, we're governance over the district, right? We are elected to be watch keepers of what goes on in the public school system on behalf of parents who are entrusting their children to the schools and the teachers and the administrators. And a lot of parents don't really have any idea what's going on other than what's in their own child's folders or whatever, so to speak, because parents are busy and overwhelmed. And something like 80% of our community members don't have children in the schools. So they are funding the schools with their tax dollars, yet they don't have children there. So they are even more removed from what is really happening in the school district. They vote for candidates sometimes with very little knowledge. So this service you guys are doing is great, because this is going to get information out to those community members of who the candidates are for school board more than ever before. So thank you so much for doing this. But because of all the craziness that's kind of happened in the past year and a half or whatever, there are more and more people basically waking up to the fact that this is your community, this is your local government, this is a way you can have a voice in what happens, and at the most basic level. And so it's been great to see people getting involved. The other night, the July meeting, where we had all those comments. I didn't count how many comments there were, but there were lines and lines of people commenting. And, a lot of them I agreed with, a lot of them I disagreed with, but I was thrilled to see them all have their chance to be able to speak, because that is how we get things done in local government. If I write a letter to my senator, do I get a response? No. I don't get any response, and I can't get any airtime with that senator, but I can go into my local school district and I can say what I need to say. And I can do that on a monthly basis if I want to. So it's been great to see parents stand up and start to get interested in this. And I hope that will continue even when things calm down. At least I'm hoping they're going to calm down.
And Danielle, I don't know if you want to chime in, but I was at a Meet the Candidate event for Owen J. Roberts with you, and then I was at one for Phoenixville last night, and at both of them, right, there's people are engaged and they're looking for leadership, right? Danielle, did you get that sense from when we were at the event at OJR?
Yeah, absolutely. I think with parents being so involved now, and like Kathy said in the beginning, I feel some parents just trust it, right? We just put our faith, like ONJ is a great school. I'm so happy to be here. We bought our house in this area before kids because of the school district. And now I find myself that maybe I didn't do my due diligence enough, not in selecting OJR, but in assuming maybe that there was a pipeline for school board candidates, that people aren't just in the place because there was an open seat and it's an easy, quick, I'll say I'm a registered Republican to get that seat. That's fine. I think it's brought, or at least shine light on where we need to focus where we can improve the leadership that we need and the people in the right seats, at least. And I hate to make it political, but like Kathy said, it's definitely political there, you know. So I reached out to my local Republican committee and said, hey, I need to be involved. I need to know who's our pipeline, who are we investing in, what do they believe, why do they believe it, and how are we going to get them in that seat?
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting point you just made, Danielle, because I think in the past, there have been school board elections where there have been like no contests, where
Mhm.
there's just been one candidate and you voted for him or you didn't. And it hasn't been a big deal at all, and people have not been very invested in it because of that. But that has changed a little bit. I think starting in the last election when I was elected, there were a full slate of candidates on both sides. And I think that's going to be the same way going forward, because I think people are starting to realize that, wow, this really does affect me, and we really need to have effective people in there. And I really want to have my voice heard. So hopefully this pipeline will be more established going forward so that we have good quality candidates ready to
Yeah, and
go.
I encourage everyone to get involved. Don't assume just because you have a local, Republican committee or Democratic committee that it's the same thing you would believe in, or that it's running as smoothly as you think, because it might not be. And I
Sure.
found that there's not even meetings in my area for Republicans. There's no meeting. I have to go to a different zone just to participate or to see what's going on or happening, or how we're getting candidates or supporting them, or who are even endorsing and why. So I encourage everyone, just get involved, send a letter, do your research, be a voice.
Yeah, and I think we just also too need to encourage our committee people. Don't forget about the school board. It's not
Yeah.
just little minor, thing that's off to the side that doesn't impact our communities. It is imperative to consider those. I know we're just volunteers, we're not paid, and that may be part of the reason why people just kind of toss it off as not really relevant. But so we need our committee members to be focused on all the candidates that are running for office, not just the bigger races.
Sure, and it affects our tax dollars. So when I didn't even know 80%, like you said, that's good to know. I had no idea the percentage. 80% don't have children in school, but yet if the school sued and you guys negotiate a settlement, that could affect people's tax dollars. If you want to build a new school or close a school, whatever it is, it affects everyone's tax dollars and also their home value. If O&J starts to get the bad reputation, we're not going to have houses selling them the first day they're listed like we do now. Right now, that's what is bringing people to our area. It's not the shopping malls. I'll tell you that.
Well, that's right. That's for sure.
Kathy, why did you get involved? Like,
Well,
you
yeah,
said your background, but like, it's a
here's really where my thinking went. I have been speaking to the school board a lot because I was concerned about the early school start time for teenagers. I've been reading a lot of medical research and realized that, getting up at 5:45 doesn't really work for teenagers' circadian rhythm, and that we are putting children in these teenagers in a lot of, physical and emotional stress, because that's not really not right for their body clock. And as I was going to the meetings to talk to the school board about this, I kind of realized that the group in front of me was a fairly dysfunctional group of people. They were arguing, they were backbiting, they were name calling. They didn't seem to be listening to the public at all, no matter what the topic was. And as I sat there and listened to other parents coming up and talking about things they were concerned about, like maybe the band or something that was going on with coaching or things like that, I started to recognize that the school board had a lot of discretion over a lot of different things, and they did not seem to be very responsive to the public at all. And so that's what perked up my ears, that this might be somewhere where I can be involved and I can be a help to start being a positive change and something that would be better functioning. Then as I started kind of getting into the campaign process, I started digging into the curricular concerns that people were having, and start realizing that, in other areas, especially of the country, There are a lot of very disturbing curricular trends that we need to keep our eyes on. And so as I was running, I did talk to people about that. That didn't become my primary campaign idea, though, because I just didn't have enough information about the topic at the time to really speak eloquently on it. But as I was campaigning and then getting elected and researching and learning, I started realizing that was probably going to be where my attention focused. And
so now where's your attention?
Yeah, now my attention is basically on that topic, basically looking at the curriculum, looking at accountability. How do we make sure that we are teaching at a high level the subject matter that we need to, without allowing political grandstanding to be taking over? Everyone's concerned about critical race theory and its interjection into the schools. I do hear a lot of people saying, no, we're not teaching critical race theory. And I say, of course, that's not part of the curriculum, but we have to make sure it's not finding its way in through all these vague and
it does.
Yeah.
We were just talking to Stacy Walmsley, a candidate over Westchester. She signed her son up about a year ago for a summer program. It was a social studies class. She got into the curriculum, and some of the bullet points were social justice, deal with things like that, like address those topics. She's like, great, let's check it out. And she just shares a story about a book her son brought to her, kind of confused at what it was trying to tell him. And it wasn't critical race theory per se, but we shouldn't be kids. It was definitely a race book, right? So that's a story for another podcast. But it's true, right, Kathy? And you've seen it. Are there any anecdotes, from a board perspective? I mean, you mentioned seeing a book, right? I mean, are there things that you stop that actually go through? Is there things that you put your hand up and somebody's like, no, this is necessary?
Well, one of the sort of anecdotal stories that I feel like needs to be told is there was a situation with a teacher training. Our school district, all of our school districts partner with the Chester County Intermediate Unit, and the Chester County Intermediate Unit does a lot of different things for us, and they help us with some of our teacher trainings. Well, last summer there was a teacher training that we were told that it was going to be to help our social studies curriculum stay relevant and whatever. So I heard that and I didn't really know what to make of that, but I just kind of put it in the back of my mind. And then as I'm just kind of doing my basic reading and research and things and hearing from people on social media, I'm seeing information about these teacher trainings. And there was one particular group. Now, of course, I can't come up with their name, but they basically were involved with the Southern Poverty Law Center. It was that group, and they were putting out a lot of teacher trainings. So I went back to our assistant superintendent and asked, I said, is this training that we're supposed to be involved in with this group? Because I'm looking at this group's website and it doesn't look like it aligns with our values. It was very much CRT based and things like that, Black Lives Matter, things like that. And she did not realize, and she said, well, let me look at that. So all these superintendents, they talked to different districts in Chester County, and Avon Grove was one of the districts where the parents were very much up in arms about this particular training. So sure enough, she looked into it, and this group was sketchy, and that training got canceled. And I was relieved. That was a win, basically. But the thing about that is this type of stuff doesn't make it out to the public. No one knows that this even happened. But, and I don't even know how it got canceled. I don't know whether, who was responsible for that, or whether the uprising in Avon Grove caused it. I don't really even know. But all I know is this was on the horizon and it had to be stopped. And it was, thank goodness. But this type of stuff, it's like you said, it's there, it's on the horizon. We might not have it in our curriculum, but we need to be very vigilant. The NEA the National Education Association, you know, the teachers union that basically is the national umbrella for the teachers unions, they are spending millions of dollars to make sure that critical race theory gets implemented into curriculums. I mentioned this also to our administration, and they hadn't known about that. And so they went and looked, they had to look into it themselves. So we board members have to be watching over these things. What are we going to do about that? You can tell me that the critical race theory is not in the Owen J. Roberts curriculum. Sure, you can say that. But if the NEA is going to spend millions of dollars promoting it, we have to be on our guard to make sure that we do not fall into this trap. This idea that we can just go, oh, we're not doing that, and walk away and wash our hands of it, that's just not going to fly. We have to stay on this topic, and that's what I intend to do.
I think some of the hiccup with that is it's coming from, obviously it's national, right? It's not just ONJ having the equity policy. You'll see this at every school board, any news thing you'll turn on. What I found is it's a larger push from PSBA, from the Department of Pennsylvania. If any parent, and I say this all the time, just don't even listen to what I tell you. Go and research it. So do yourself a favor, pull up Google or YouTube and type in equity PSBA and just see the trainings that come up. Type in equity PDE, see what comes up. They have hubs on the PDE website. And while ONJ might never have a course called Critical Race Theory 101, it's the practice. And I think the word's praxis, where they actually use it. So critical race theory was developed to look at every law, every policy in place to see if it holds racism. There is nothing different than us creating an equity policy that uses an equity lens to look for racism, unbiased or consciously biased things in our policies, our curriculum, everything at ONJ. It's literally implementing the theory. So when people say, oh, it's not taught, it's being practiced, not taught. We are practicing it.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And I think that this whole idea that we're just going to say it's not being taught, it's disingenuous, and it doesn't hit the issue head on that we're going to be. Part of this also is teacher trainings as well. This is where this practice starts to get embedded. Because if we're going to give teachers books and materials to read that are, you know, basically implementing critical race theory or discussing critical race theory, I should say, then how are we going to say that that's not finding its way into our classroom?
It's a really good point, Kathy. I was at that Phoenixville event last night, and somebody asked a question, and the question was, hey, my friend or my neighbor, whoever is a teacher, and I asked her point blank, are you teaching CRT? And the first response was, what is CRT? And when she said, well, it's this critical race, oh, that, no, that's not something that we're doing. And then, you know, this person, if she doesn't show up to a meetup event, where else did she hear, right? What you just shared, right? So I think it's really important that people question authority, and then, you know, question their authority, right? Because the teacher, the reason I brought that up is the training, right? So maybe there is some different teacher training that needs to be addressed, not, you know, the actual thing that they're trying to talk about, but how do you actually address this new specter, right? That we're talking about being totally against, right? We're on the socio-emotional learning side, all right? So lots of merit there. We don't want to go over here. This is the posture everybody's giving, right? From a leadership perspective. So why don't we spend a lot of money training our teachers. Why don't we train them? Hey, here's how you can run a classroom and guard it from all this stuff. Sounds like a great idea to me.
Yeah, and teacher training is obviously a topic I've interest in too. And you know, last summer we were supposed to be able to visit, the school board members were supposed to be able to visit some of the teacher trainings that were being done. But then, of course, when we had this whole COVID mask wearing issue thing, you know, no one allowed in the buildings, no visitors, that got squashed. So I'm hoping that we can kind of get back into that the board can have more oversight over teacher training so that we can dig into these things and see, you know, exactly what is happening.
It might
conflict.
even be the resources in general, right? So I
Yeah.
think every school district relies heavily on the Department of Education and on PSBA. So they put together a whole, training series, and it's just easy to be like, yes, let's have all our teachers and staff go through that. Not even knowing, because let's be real, let's trust the state. They are the experts. They're getting it nationally. But what we've seen is it's clearly politically driven, not with no data support behind it. There's nothing that shows implementing this, training in this is going to make any school better or any student feel better.
Yeah, and it is a difficult topic because you said, because a lot of this stuff is coming down from the Pennsylvania Department of Education. I'll give you another example of an issue that occurred last year, something like February. The school board was talked to about the fact that we had gotten a report from the state that showed that our school district was oh, sorry, this is difficult to put this terminology right. We were overrepresented in black students being identified as being emotionally disturbed. So like if you looked at our black population, there was an overrepresentation of black students being identified as emotionally disturbed. And so I looked at that, and in my mind, I'm thinking, well, if these students are emotionally disturbed and they happen to be black, what does that matter? They need certain services. We need to give them what they need. What is the point of that? Well, the point of that was that the Pennsylvania Department of Education is trying to, as you were saying, Danielle, look at everything through the equity lens. We have to equalize everything, if you have too many students that are emotionally disturbed, there must be a racial component to that. I don't believe that's true, but that's kind of this message that I was getting. So one of our initiatives to try to help this situation was to provide students in one of our schools that has a higher African American population with a basketball program, morning basketball program with mentors, adult mentors, so that maybe these students don't always have to be identified as emotionally disturbed because they are getting extra help, extra services, extra adult input into their lives. And when I was told about this program, I thought to myself, well, that's great because everyone's getting help. How could you be against that, right? But there's still the underlying issue that we basically decide that if a group of students has a certain trend, that it's because it's racist is a disturbing idea to me. And the problem is, no matter what policies OJ Roberts decides to implement or what our equity policy looks like, the state is going to continue to break our students into demographic groups and create these statistical reports for us. And not only are they going to tell us when there's something that they consider a red flag, we are going to be asked to spend a certain amount of money to rectify it. Now, honestly, if you were in a dishonest school district, you would be able to fix that right away, right? Just stop identifying kids as emotionally disturbed. Make that number look right. That could be done instantly. But of course, that would serve no one. So we're in a very difficult position because the Department of Education has a lot of mandates. They have a lot of requirements for us, and we are just teetering on the edge, trying to keep, the balance of really serving students and their needs, and not just putting them in a racial category or a demographic category and making decisions to make numbers look right. Very hard.
I agree. And I think that's something that's measured where we have some, people talk out about the equity policy saying it's for the smart jock who's called stupid. That's not something that can be measured. We can't survey every classroom and say, hey, are the jocks that, are being called names being, are we adhering to their needs too? Because that's a lot of what I heard at the school board meeting was it's for, the marching band girl who's sitting at home on Friday night by herself. These things can't be measured. We can't hold anyone accountable to that. That's not what the equity policy is even about. It's all about demographics and numbers, like you said, that they can be measured and be held accountable for.
Well, yes, and exactly. And also this equity policy, when we talk about like special needs children or racial issues, we are conflating a couple different things here because we cannot manage like bullying and behavioral problems by just declaring a policy that's going to, eliminate those problems. Though a lot of the anecdotes that people brought up when we had those school board listening sessions, they were literally those types of things. Someone called my child a name on the bus. Well, we don't want anyone doing that type of thing, but I can't, as a school board member, just put a policy out that's going to fix that. So we are kind of conflating a bunch of different topics in this, and I don't know that it's necessarily going to serve the purpose that we wish it would serve. So I do think that we need to revisit that. We need to go back to that and try to tighten up this because in its current state, I can see its flaws and I can see where we're going to end up in trouble, and we're not going to be able to give students the education they deserve. Basically the whole equity policy was supposed to be in place so that students were looked at as individuals and getting the individual help they need, not as demographic groups. So I do think we're kind of on a miss in some of those areas.
Yeah, because I agree. We can have that battle all day long, but we have it on both sides. I mean, last year after the insurrection, we had a group of students create a list of back the blue families or Trump supporter families, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So it's on both sides. I can tell you that my daughter, who is white, was bullied on the bus and told that she would be stabbed, and she does not ride the bus anymore. Right? That's something I now have to drive my child to and from school. This happened in second grade, so I've been doing it for the past 2 years. And again, that's not something I'm working through with the school, but it is on both sides, white kids or Asian kids, and I don't even like just picking a certain demographic that might be not getting the attention they need, because we have a wide, diverse group of students, not just, I think our second minority group is actually Hispanic, in J. Roberts, if I'm correct.
Yeah, I'm not sure about the exact numbers, but I'm pretty sure our Asian population, which is primarily Indian, is larger than our African American. I would have to get these numbers up, but regardless of what they are and which people fall into which groups, I don't think it really serves anyone very well to just put people into groups and try to make policies based on group needs, because every child needs to have an education that is as individualized as possible, but knowing that we cannot serve every child in everything they need. And I think that that's another issue I think that we need to make sure we're looking into when we talk about equity. The public school has been charged to basically do so many things now that it's actually impossible to keep up with. Like to serve every student's every need and taking that role as that the parent used to fill is just not sustainable. We definitely want to serve students with supports, but I think we're getting to a point where, a lot of our parents are assuming that the school is going to take care of so many different issues, and it's very pervasive and it's not really appropriate.
Yeah, and where do you draw the line? Because my daughter would want an individual bathroom, and I highly doubt the school's going to install her own personal bathroom, right? But I'm realistic, and I know that's not feasible, right? But
Yeah.
like you said, it's every student. I don't look at anyone based on the color of their skin. They're all student. They all need to be heard. They all need to be supported, and they all need the resources. When COVID first hit and we decided to go virtual, my daughter's iPad broke, and my husband was unemployed from both of his jobs, and we were not in the position to go out and buy her a new iPad or a laptop. And I reached out to the school principal, as I was instructed to do, and I was told that it would go based in order of financial needs. Well, no one asked me my financial burden or what I was going through or how my family was affected. And I hope it wasn't assumed because I was white that, we have the means to buy a new laptop or iPad, because that's not the case. But but she should have been looked at too. If I need a laptop, I need a laptop. That's really as simple as it is. I wouldn't ask if I didn't need it. But again, every student, that's the
Well, and a lot of those decisions that you're talking about are made based on students who already have been identified for like free and reduced lunch. And that's probably where they started with people.
I'm sure, but we were all affected differently,
We
right?
were, and this was obviously a unique situation because
Yes.
people who were probably had quite different financial position, who were in a quite different financial position, were suddenly finding themselves in a lot of trouble. And I think the school district, obviously needs to be sensitive to that. But back to your other point about, students' needs and their individualism, I really think we're going down a wrong road if we look at a kid's skin color or racial background to determine their needs. You can't use that as a litmus test. Students are, no matter what race, whatever, everyone is a person, and they need to be evaluated that way and looked at that way. This idea that we're just going to group people and that's how we're going to figure out how to educate kids, I really think that's going to have bad outcomes if we continue down that road.
Yeah, let's teach kids how to create their own cool kids table, right? You don't have to go fit in, right? Go be that red striped zebra. Go be that go be that unique individual.
Yeah, and honestly, like these listening sessions that we had last year and that we're going to continue, I think are key. Because honestly, I really think a lot of our issues with the bullying and all these things are because people are just not well connected with kids or parents that just are different from them. And the more you make those connections and the more you reach out and you learn something about someone who may be very different or have a very different background than you, the more sensitive you're going to be, the more caring you're going to be, the more interested you're going to be in their unique experiences. And I think that's how we solve this problem. We need to connect people and help them to see each other as people and not just numbers on a paper or, whatever.
And that's what this is all about. And Kathy, thank you so much for your time. Maybe as a way to wrap things up, if you don't have anything else you wanted to share, to that point, people who are interested in this are interested in, helping the children, right? So what are some things that the people can continue to do? How would, as a board member, right? It's great to have your perspective, right? How would you coach, the people that are probably in a Facebook group or in a Geneva group, or, they're somewhere engaged with some group of parents planning for a board meeting or putting together an email or figuring out what they're going to do. This is a long conversation, not a summer project. So how would you what kind of perspective or what would you say to that type of audience?
Yeah. Well, first off, I would say, remember that the school board is about governance. The school board is not about getting into a teacher's classroom and instructing them on how to do a better job as a teacher. We are overseeing the district as a whole. So as much as we love to get everyone's input and information, sometimes there are things that you just need to directly go to your teacher with. And if the teacher is not responsive, there's a chain of command there. And and school board members want to hear all these things, but we don't have power over every one of these decisions. So going through the right chain of command, go to your principal next, then go to an administrator, those things, that's going to be a better route for parents when they really need help. But as far as the rest of it, board members like me, we do like to hear parents' concerns on any topic. And so you can always write an email and reach out and say, hey, I'm wondering about this or that. That's a good way to talk to us. And then if you do want to speak on something that's pretty serious and you're not getting where you want to get with your teacher or principal, you come to a public meeting and you can comment at any time. And those are great comments to hear. Just be aware that you get more interaction if you come to what we call a working session, where a topic that you want to talk about is being discussed, than if you just come to the regular business meeting, because the regular business meeting is primarily just voting on things that have already been hashed out in the working sessions. So you can always come and make a comment, but if you really want to get it engaged in dialogue with a problem, it's better to do that at the specific working session where that topic's going to be discussed. So parents, remember that we are elected by you and we're here to serve you. And we need to know what's going on. So keeping me informed on anything is great. I like to see people who may hear of a problem that they're concerned about. I like to read up on it. I read articles. Another important thing, sorry, I'm rambling a little bit, but just to be aware, the board we have in place, we may be very ideologically different at times, but everyone reads what is sent to us. Even if we don't agree with it, you have a very responsive group of people in there right now who will read whatever email you send, look at articles that you send, so that those things have to keep coming, because if that's how you're going to get your voice heard, among the board that we have now. Now we have an election coming up, and it's good to have a balanced board, right? It's good to have people with different perspectives and things like that. But we're kind of in a position right now where we could possibly lose all of our conservatives, except for myself, because I'm not running right now. So I think that people that do see that this is important to keep a balance there need to make sure that they get on a vote and get those conservatives back on. We have already 4 fairly liberal board members who are not up for re-election. And so the balance of this board could go way off kilter if we don't get out and vote. I could possibly be the sole conservative voice on there, and I don't want to give myself too much credit about as far as how much sway I will have with fellow board members. So I really need help. I really need these candidates to find their way to the table, our conservative candidates, so that we can continue these dialogues and not be out, be totally overwhelmed by one point of view.
Yeah, and you need support, right? You need
Yep.
you need your voice to be held heard, and we're going to try our best. And that's why we created this, right? We the parents. So
I think you've done a fabulous job. And honestly, I'm kind of like, wait, where were you when I was running? But on the other hand, I got elected, so I'm okay. But I'm glad you're here now.
Kathy, thank you so much for your time. That was really fun.
Great. Well, I'm up for a talk.